My wife spent my life. Savings on a secret vacation. So I took everything she loved and vanished from her life without warning. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I thought I married the most loyal woman alive. For years, my life revolved around one goal: building something solid, something lasting. I worked 10, sometimes 12 hours a day, saving every extra dollar while everyone else my age was out traveling or buying the latest gadgets. It wasn't glamorous, but I believed that sacrifice now would mean peace later. Jenna used to tell me she admired that about me, how focused I was, how grounded I seemed. We met when I was still climbing my way up the ladder at a small logistics firm. She'd come into my life like sunlight after a long winter, bright, warm, comforting. I'd never been with someone who made me feel seen the way she did. She'd pack lunches, leave me small notes that said things like, "Don't forget why you're working so hard. It's for us." And every time I'd read one, it made those endless shifts feel worth it. When we got married, I handed her the keys to everything: our joint accounts, the budgeting apps, even the responsibility of paying the bills. It wasn't about control, it was about trust. She was the emotional balance to my practicality. I was the provider. She was the heart of our home. At night, when I'd get home and see her sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, waiting for me with that soft smile, I'd feel this deep sense of peace. Like maybe, for once in my life, I wasn't just working for survival. I was building something real. I used to lie awake beside her, watching her sleep, and think, I finally did it. I found someone who believes in me, the way I always wanted. I didn't know then that trust would become the very thing that destroyed me. The first time I noticed something was off, it was small. So small I almost laughed it off. Jenna started coming home with new clothes I didn't remember her buying. She'd shrug it off, saying, "It was on sale," or, "I returned something old, don't worry." I wanted to believe her. After all, she'd always been careful with money. At least, that's what I thought. Then came the late-night texts. Her phone, once casually left on the counter, started living in her pocket or face down on the nightstand. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd smile sweetly and say, "Just the girls, planning a little get-together." It sounded harmless, but there was something in her tone, something that didn't sit right. One night, I walked into the living room while she was on a call. Her voice dropped instantly, softer, secretive. She turned her back when she saw me. I froze, not wanting to start a fight, but that cold feeling in my chest told me something had shifted between us. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind replayed every small inconsistency: the missing receipts, the sudden uptick in credit card charges, the new perfume I'd never smelled before. Still, every time doubt crept in, she had a way of disarming me. She'd rest her hand on mine and whisper, "You're working too hard, baby. You're starting to sound paranoid." That line hit harder than she realized. It made me feel guilty, like I was betraying her by doubting her. So, I buried it. I told myself every marriage had rough patches. But then, a friend from work mentioned he'd seen Jenna at a fancy restaurant. Alone, or so he thought. When I asked her about it later, she laughed it off. "You know how rumors are," she said, brushing my cheek with her fingers. Her smile was soft. Her lie was flawless. And for the first time, I felt my trust start to crack. It started as a normal Sunday morning. I sat down with a mug of coffee and opened our shared account to prep for a down payment on the small property we'd been dreaming about. I'd been saving for nearly 8 years, skipping vacations, driving an old car, eating at home every night. But when the numbers loaded on the screen, I blinked hard. Something was wrong. The balance wasn't just low, it was empty. My heart started pounding. I refreshed the page, thinking it had to be a bank error. But no, the withdrawals were there. Large transfers, one after another, over several weeks. Tens of thousands gone. I felt my stomach twist. "Jenna," I called out, my voice trembling. "Did you move the savings somewhere?" She came into the room, towel wrapped around her hair, completely calm. "Oh, that," she said casually, drying her hands. "I had to take care of something urgent. I was going to tell you." "Something urgent?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Like what?" She rolled her eyes. "Why are you getting so worked up? It's our money. I'll explain later." But she never did. That day turned into a week, and every time I brought it up, she'd deflect. Say I was overreacting, or that I didn't trust her. The worst part? She said it with such confidence that I started doubting myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went back through the statements, hotel bookings, luxury brands, payments to accounts I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I scrolled, my mind trying to piece together a version of events that didn't destroy me. I told myself there had to be a reason. Maybe she'd made an investment. Maybe it was for a surprise. Anything but betrayal. But deep down, a cold truth started whispering inside me. Whatever she spent that money on. A few nights later, when Jenna fell asleep, I opened her laptop. I'd never done that before, not once in our entire marriage. But trust had turned into a question I couldn't silence anymore. My hands shook as I typed her password, half hoping it wouldn't work. It did. The first thing I saw was an email confirmation. "Your luxury vacation itinerary is ready." My throat went dry. My cursor hovered over it like touching it might burn. When I opened it, my heart dropped. Flights, resort bookings, spa packages, all under her name. 2 tickets, not one. I clicked through to her photos folder, and that's when everything fell apart. Pictures of her laughing on a beach I'd never seen. Her holding champagne on a yacht. Her in a dress I didn't recognize, surrounded by people I didn't know. Each image felt like a knife, slicing away years of belief. When I confronted her the next morning, I couldn't even find my voice. I just handed her the laptop. She glanced at the screen, sighed, and crossed her arms. "You went through my things?" she said, her tone sharp, defensive. I managed to whisper, "You spent our savings on a vacation? Without me?" She laughed. Actually laughed. "You're being dramatic. I needed a break, okay? You're always working, and I felt invisible. It was my money, too." I stared at her, searching for some sign of regret, some flicker of guilt. There was nothing. Just irritation. Like I was the one ruining her morning. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the glow from her travel photos lighting up my screen. Every image was proof that the woman I loved had treated my sacrifice like pocket change. And as the clock ticked past midnight, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If she could lie about this, what else had she been hiding? I couldn't stop thinking about those photos. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing in places I'd never been, smiling for someone else. Curiosity turned to obsession. I needed answers, not assumptions, not guesses. Proof. So one night while she was showering, I went deeper. I opened her cloud backups. It was a boundary I never thought I'd cross, but she'd already burned that bridge. Inside a hidden album was a set of pictures that made my blood run cold. Her holding hands with a man I'd never seen. Same beach, same trip, same smiles. Only this time, they weren't pretending to be just friends. I felt my chest tighten until it hurt to breathe. I clicked into her messages next, scrolling through weeks of conversations. His name was Evan. Their texts were filled with jokes about me, calling me boring, too cautious, the guy who saves money like it's his personality. At one point, she wrote, "He thinks I'm on a girls' trip. Poor guy doesn't even question it." The room spun. I sat there, staring at those words, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out every other sound. This wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. She'd taken my life savings and used it to fund her affair. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, I looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside me broke. But instead of exploding, I smiled faintly. "Hey," I said softly, "I was thinking we should start fresh. Maybe plan something big together soon." She lit up instantly, completely unaware. "Finally," she said, laughing, "you're not mad anymore." I kissed her forehead and told her I'd make everything right soon. But in my mind, something else was forming. A quiet, deliberate promise. She would never see what was coming. After that night, everything changed. At least for me. Outwardly, I was the same husband. Calm, affectionate, reliable. But inside, I was quietly unraveling every thread of our life together. I started taking mental inventory of everything that was mine. The business account, the car, the assets still under my name. She thought she'd broken me. In truth, she'd woken me up. I started saving every message, every transaction, every photo that tied her to the affair. I met with a lawyer under the guise of a business consultation and explained everything. The man didn't even flinch, said he'd seen it before, told me to stay quiet, stay patient. That's when I learned silence could be sharper than any confrontation. At home, Jenna grew more distant, almost arrogant. She'd spend hours on her phone, taking calls in another room, telling me she might need time apart soon. I just nodded, pretending not to care. The colder she became, the calmer I acted. Friends noticed my stillness and mistook it for sadness. One even told me, "Man, she's lucky to have someone as forgiving as you." I smiled but said nothing, because by then, forgiveness was the last thing on my mind. Every night I lay awake beside her, pretending to sleep, planning my exit down to the smallest detail, one that would leave her exactly where she left me, in silence, surrounded by emptiness she created. And when everything was ready, I didn't feel fear. I felt peace. It happened 2 weeks later. I came home early one evening and found her on the phone. Her tone sharp, mocking. I stayed by the doorway, listening. "He's clueless," she laughed. "I could take half his stuff, and he wouldn't even fight me." My chest tightened as I heard her tell someone, probably Evan, that she was almost done pretending. When she hung up, I didn't say a word. I just stood there. She turned, startled, then quickly recovered. "Oh," she said casually, "I didn't hear you come in." I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could do this, but the words got stuck. All I managed was, "How long have you been planning this?" Her expression didn't change. "Don't make this dramatic," she said coldly. "You've been distant. You made this easy." Those words shattered something in me. Not the anger. That was gone. What replaced it was emptiness, deep and quiet. That night, I sat on the floor of our bedroom, staring at the wedding photo on the dresser. The smile on her face in that picture felt like a cruel joke. Every sacrifice, every late night, every dream, all of it had been for nothing. I realized then that the woman I'd loved didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I whispered to myself, "You wanted freedom, Jenna. You're about to get it." That was the last night I ever slept under the same roof as her. The next morning, I began executing the plan I'd been crafting in silence. I met my lawyer again, transferred the business accounts, and filed for divorce without her knowing. I moved the remaining savings into a secure personal account and arranged to rent a small apartment across town. Every document, every detail, handled with precision. Jenna was too distracted by her affair to notice. She'd leave early, come back late, barely speaking. Her absence was my freedom. I took my time removing things that mattered. Important papers, personal belongings, the heirloom watch from my father. Bit by bit, my life disappeared from that house. To her, nothing seemed different. To me, it was the sound of chains falling away. One night, I stood in our living room and looked around. The furniture, the photos, the walls, all built on lies. It no longer felt like home. It felt like a crime scene. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside a folded note that simply said, "You spent my savings on your happiness. I'm spending your future on my peace." The next morning, before sunrise, I walked out. No yelling, no goodbye. Just silence and the echo of my footsteps down the driveway. By the time Jenna woke up, I was gone. The bank accounts were locked, my number disconnected, and my lawyer had delivered the divorce papers to her email. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. Jenna's frantic calls started within hours. At first, they were angry, demanding to know where I was, accusing me of running away like a coward. Then came the pleading ones, followed by tears. But I didn't answer. Through mutual friends, I heard she showed up at my office, then my parents' house. No one knew where I'd gone, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I'd built my life around her once. Now I was building one without her. I rented a small studio near the coast. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout, surrounded by boxes, and felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Jenna was unraveling. She had no access to the accounts, no control, no stability. The same people she'd boasted to now whispered behind her back. Word spread about her affair. Evan? He disappeared the moment things got difficult. She tried to reach me again, this time through my lawyer, begging for one last conversation. I refused. The man who used to drop everything for her was gone. In her desperation, she sent a final message that read, "You're destroying my life." I looked at the screen and whispered, "No, Jenna. You destroyed it yourself." Then I blocked her number for good. Weeks turned into months. The silence between us became its own kind of justice. I learned from friends that Jenna was struggling. Her friends had cut her off, her credit cards maxed out, and she'd been forced to move back into her parents' house. Meanwhile, my life began to bloom again. I poured myself into work, and within a few months, I landed a major client that doubled my income. I started running again, sleeping through the night, rediscovering what peace actually felt like. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about her, not with longing, but with disbelief. How could someone throw everything away for attention, for a thrill that vanished so quickly? Then one afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I saw her waiting by my car. She looked different, thinner, paler, exhausted. When our eyes met, she tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded once. We sat in a nearby cafe. She started crying before she even spoke. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I lost everything. Please, can we start over?" Her words didn't move me. I just listened, calm and detached. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "You spent years teaching me what love isn't," I said softly. Now I'm just learning to live without you." Tears streamed down her face as I stood up to leave. She begged, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the air felt cleaner than it had in years. The weeks after that meeting were strangely quiet. Jenna didn't contact me again, though mutual friends said she was trying to make things right. But by then, there was nothing left to fix. I'd moved on emotionally, financially, and mentally. I bought a small condo overlooking the city, my first real home on my own. Every corner of it felt earned, untouched by her shadow. My business grew, my circle tightened, and I stopped looking over my shoulder. Then, one evening, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a handwritten note from Jenna. No apologies this time, just one line. I finally understand what I threw away. I folded it back and placed it in a drawer. I didn't feel pity or pride, just closure. She'd lost the one thing she couldn't buy back, respect. For the first time, I realized revenge hadn't been my goal. It was control. Taking back what she'd stolen from me. Peace, dignity, and freedom. That night, I sat on the balcony, watching city lights blur into the horizon. Somewhere out there, Jenna was learning that silence can be louder than rage. And for me, that was enough. A year later, I barely recognized my old life. The pain had faded into memory, like a scar that no longer hurt to touch. I'd rebuilt everything, stronger, simpler, mine. I heard through a friend that Jenna tried to move to another city, but couldn't find steady work. Her reputation followed her, and so did the consequences. Evan never came back. Neither did the version of herself she'd thrown away. One evening, I passed by a restaurant we'd once dreamed of, visiting. I stopped outside for a moment, watching couples laugh inside, and smiled. Not out of nostalgia, but out of peace. For years, I thought revenge meant destruction. Now I understood it meant absence. The absence of my presence in her life. The absence of chaos in mine. I never reached out again. Never responded. Never explained. She took everything I had. My savings, my trust, my years. But I took something she couldn't replace. The part of me that loved her. And in the end, that was the purest revenge of all. As I walked away from that restaurant, I felt no anger, no pain, just quiet triumph. Because some stories don't end with explosions. Some end with silence so absolute. It becomes the loudest thing they'll ever hear.